Welcome to our best practices video. Today we're going to be focusing on points and lines. My name is Stephanie Bowen. Let's get started. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Using maps is a great way to engage students to start to think about points and lines. We can ask students, where do you see math in this video? They can identify parallel lines, perpendicular lines, square corners, and students are definitely engaged when they see a map of their school or their neighborhood that is being used in the classroom. Our unit of focus in this video is points and lines, and here are some of our benchmarks for learning. Describing and drawing points, lines, line segments, rays, intersecting lines, perpendicular lines, and parallel lines. Students will identify points and lines in two-dimensional figures, and they'll be drawing lines of symmetry in two-dimensional figures and identifying line-symmetric two-dimensional figures. What does student learning look like in the classroom? In this first example, we see the student has made the points CD and placed them on the line that is created out of the popsicle sticks with the arrows, recorded this in their journal, and then showing that they can do it with the correct mathematical symbols. Another thing you might see is in this case, the student made a line segment AB and is then able to record that in their journal with the correct definition. We will also see students finding real-world examples. In this case, students are visiting a playground or different places around the school to identify parallel and perpendicular lines. The students would then come back to the classroom and be drawing examples of the different types of lines that they found in the real world. And also, we want to see students having real-world hands-on experiences with shapes, folding and finding lines of symmetry, and identifying shapes that have no lines of symmetry, one line, or more than one line of symmetry. Students can also then be recording the number of lines of symmetry that they identify. Good questions drive our student discussions in the classroom. So what should student learning sound like? We might hear questions like, what makes a ray different from a line? How did you know if the track contained parallel or perpendicular sides? Notice that these questions are encouraging students to make sense and explain the vocabulary in real-world examples that they have found. We also want students to be talking about the lines of symmetry and making sense of which types of figures have fewer lines of symmetry or more lines of symmetry and why that is. These types of questions will engage students in MTR 4. As you can see, this geometry unit is very dependent on vocabulary. There will be lots of new vocabulary words for students to learn. We want to hear both students and teachers using the vocabulary, making their own definitions and drawings, using examples and non-examples. How will students demonstrate their knowledge? Here are some possible examples. This is an explore activity from STEMscopes where students are given a constellation and then are identifying points, lines, line segments in the constellation. Another explore example is where students are creating perpendicular and parallel lines and then writing what they found out from their models. We have an exit ticket from STEMscopes where students are identifying lines of symmetry. And you might also see students doing games where they're developing clues using the vocabulary words that they've learned to guess different shapes. These examples will focus on MTR 5 and 7. As you're visiting classrooms, you'll want to be asking students questions about their understanding. For example, can you explain the difference between a line segment, and a ray? You might ask students to find an example of parallel lines or perpendicular lines in their classroom, and then ask further what makes them parallel or perpendicular. You might also ask students, do all shapes have lines of symmetry? And that will encourage them to explain to you what symmetry means. Points and lines memory is a possible activity for students to do at home. Parents would write the vocabulary terms from the unit on one set of index cards, and then the child would draw an example of each on a different index card. Then it's time to flip them all over for an old-fashioned game of memory. Students will be matching the picture to the correct vocabulary word. Thank you for joining us as we talked about points and lines in third grade. Hope to see you for our next best practices video.